Hello, I'm Mandy Kaplan here with an important message. Throughout the modern era, millions, nay, billions of people have enjoyed countless hours of video games, stars, both Trek and Wars, comic books, and other nerdy endeavors. That's an infinite number of gasps and laughs as 20-sided dice are thrown, Pokemon are caught, and Doctor Who has done whatever the hell they do. Yet one person has missed out on all of this. One woman who doesn't know her droids from her hobbits has been left behind. Until now. That's right. I'm trading in my Taylor Swift and Housewives for superheroes and Wookiees as I finally embrace all things sci-fi and fantasy on my podcast, Make Me a Nerd, with Mandy Kaplan. Each week, a passionate guest will try to baptize me into the world of nerdery as they share one of these iconic entities that I have somehow missed. And you can help. For just $5 a month or $55 a year, you can become a member. For your generous donation, which is less than a new Tesla, you'll not only be supporting my mission, you'll get early access to episodes, bonus content, and more stuff I haven't thought of yet. So please, join me wherever you podcast as I finally learn what all the fuss has been about and see if going through this nerd-education will, in fact, make me a nerd. Or, as they say in Klingon, who am I kidding?
Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
Horror movies get a bad rap. They're cheap thrills, mindless gore, not cinema, blah, blah, blah.
But we here at Sitting in the Dark know better. We know that horror is more than just jump scares and chainsaws. It's a reflection of our deepest fears, our anxieties, Okay, and there's a lot of jump scares and chainsaws.
Join us, Pete Wright, Tommy Metz III, Kyle Olson, and Keenan Diaz, as we cut into the dark heart of horror cinema.
Every episode, we explore a different facet of the genre, from survival horror to home invasions, from zombies to birds. We tickle the tropes, analyze the angles, and sharpen our own axes along the way.
We'll introduce you to the classics that shaped the genre.
And the modern masterpieces that are pushing the boundaries of terror.
Sitting in the Dark is your guide to navigating the terrifying, thrilling, and sometimes hilariously bad world of horror movies.
We'll help you understand why we love to be scared.
And maybe even convert you into a horror fan yourself.
So turn off the lights, close the basement door,
and join us.
Sitting in the dark.
In a world where podcasts are a dime a dozen, one show dares to stand out from the rest.
The Film Board, a podcast unafraid to tell it like it is.
We're here for one reason and one reason only. Downloads.
That's right. We review new release movies because that's what gets people's attention.
But just because we're in it for the clicks doesn't mean we don't take our job seriously.
We're part of the Next Reel family of film podcasts, and we're proud of it.
Our reviews are just as insightful and thought-provoking as any of our other film podcasts.
It's just that this podcast is all about that sweet, sweet SEO.
The nectar squoze from the tree of Bing.
We're only human, but we're also creators.
And creators eat clicks to survive.
So if you want honest, unfiltered opinions on the very latest movies right on opening weekend,
delivered with the self-awareness of a team looking for downloads,
then tune in to the Film Board.
Where every download counts, but yours counts the most.
Hooked on you, baby, you're golden. Time moves, I never noticed. Just can't get enough. Got me wonderstruck.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Make Me a Nerd. I'm Mandy Kaplan, a mainstream mom whose mission it is to explore all things nerd culture that I've been missing out of and slightly afraid of my whole life. I am thrilled to welcome back for another three-peat. This is rare air, Matthew Fox. I'm just saying. Honored. Tommy Metz is looking into having jackets made like the SNL thing.
I like it.
But they are the creator and co-host of Superhero Ethics and Star Wars Generations, two podcasts that are on the True Story, a part of the True Story FM family. Prior episodes of Make Me a Nerd featuring Matthew Fox were The Penguin, which changed me for the better in every way, and Orville.
Yeah.
So 2 out of 3 ain't bad, Matthew Fox. Welcome back to discuss The Last of Us.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to it. This was a show that I really loved, and looks like for once we did not create a convert in you. So we'll look forward to having this kind of discussion.
To quote Meatloaf, as I often do, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yep.
This was not in the win column.
That's fair.
In my nerducation. So The Last of Us was a huge video game, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you play said video game?
I did not. I am oddly not a video game person. In one of the many ways that my partner and I gender flip, I spend a lot of time on the couch watching and cooking snacks for my partner while she plays video games.
Okay.
So I watched the show before playing the video game, but then watched her play through the video game and then went back and watched the show again. And she had been talking to me about the video game the whole time I was watching it. And I've now also watched her play through the second video game, which we're about to get. Season 2 of the show is based on that second video game.
Okay. Just to stop down here, you enjoy watching someone play through a game?
When the game has a great story. Okay. One of the things that I have been, like, you and I are of similar generations. For me, video games are Pac-Man and Defender and Missile Command. Things I played when I was 10, but then pretty much got out of when I was, maybe Legend of Zelda, but pretty much stopped when I became an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started hearing people in my friend groups talk about, like, which characters from video games they shipped with each other or, like, did cosplays of and stuff like this, I was really kind of confused. And my partner, who I've been with now almost 10 years, really helped me get into understanding that much more recently, video games have become much more stories. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, there's kind of a loose story, but mainly it's about the video game, action, like pushing buttons in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, and The Last of Us, I think, is probably the best example out there, it's using a video game to tell a story.
Right.
Where, yes, you got to push some buttons at certain points, and sometimes those points are hard, but really it's about using the medium of story of a video game as a different kind of storytelling that we're going to talk about.
Right.
And I think it's part of why I love the show so much is because it finds a way to capture that.
And as a voiceover actor who has been lucky enough to do a couple of video games, well-known video games, the emotion is real. The acting is real. It is storytelling in the best way. It's no longer,
right,
simply what, like you said, pushing buttons. So I see that and respect it. It's not my thing.
That's fair.
Tried to play Zelda and I failed miserably. And then my husband is very into these video games, Red Dead Redemption right now. And nothing in me has the patience to sit and watch somebody play through a video game.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, I often have my phone in my hand while I'm watching,
Thank you for your honesty.
So it's like the fight scenes I'm not as interested in, but like the cut scenes, the storytelling, talking with her about the decisions she's making and stuff like that. Like on my own podcast, there's been some great storytelling in the Star Wars universe through some of the Jedi Survivor games. And so we've talked about that.
Hopefully Jer won't hear this part of this episode and won't say, oh, some partners and spouses sit and support and enjoy watching
your secret is safe with me.
Thank you. Pete, can you edit this out just for Jeremy's feed? Is that possible? I wanted to know how similar this show, The Last of Us, to this video game. There were parts, especially in the beginning. The first time I felt like I was in a video game was way back in the beginning of the pilot when they are in the truck trying to get out of Dodge because it's falling apart. And you felt like you were in a video game. I'm physically demonstrating in a really dumb way, but right, we felt like we were in the car with things flying out of nowhere at us. And I thought, oh, cool, like this feels like how it feels in a video game.
Yeah, to me, I think there's 3 ways in which they really captured the video game-ness into a TV show in a way that I've never really seen before. And like, I remember going many years ago to the theater to watch the World of Warcraft movie and bursting out into laughter at the moment that was supposed to be big and emotional because it was just such a badly made movie.
Mm.
And this, I think, has totally reshaped the bar. And there have been a lot of other great ones as well. Fallout, I think, is another good example of a TV show based on a video game that was really good. But I think the three things they did, one is that there were a lot of scenes that were quite literal shot-for-shot remakes. And I think the truck scene, I believe, is one of them. A number of the others, like where there's particular... Yes, you identified it. Gold star. Well done.
Podcast points.
There you go. Just 5 more and you get the bear on the top shelf.
Oh.
A number of things later, like just particular, like, where the camera pans over a certain like view that Joel and Ellie are having is the exact same as the video game.
Mm-hmm.
A second is, and I think this is something you're really happy about, they really honored the voice actors in important ways. First of all, so for example, Pedro Pascal plays the main character of Joel.
Mm-hmm.
He sat down with a voice actor who voiced Joel in the video game, and they talked a lot about like the interpretations of the characters and things like that. And a number of the characters got to do that. Second, they brought some of those voice actors into this as actors themselves. And so, for example, that the voice actor of Joel plays a different role. And I think the one that to me is most touching and so beautiful, for those who haven't played the game or seen the show, it's really kind of a there's so much to say about what it's about, but I'll just say that like the two of the main characters are Joel, an adult man, and this teenage girl he's kind of adopted and gone on this horrible road trip through a dystopian nightmare zombie universe, Ellie.
Mm-hmm.
The actor who did the voice actress for Ellie, it's kind of a spoiler because we get a flashback, plays Ellie's mother in the show. And because Ellie has kind of superpowers that happened at the moment of her birth, we see her going through the birth process.
Mm-hmm.
And the actress has talked in interviews about how much it meant to her that she had kind of like, metaphorically given birth to this character by being the first voice actress.
Right.
And then now quite literally gets to give birth to her, and that she and Bella Ramsey, the actress who plays her, had worked together a lot. And so I just thought all of that is so beautiful.
Okay, so I just looked it up because I thought, do I know these actors from my circles? And no, I don't know anyone personally in my 10 seconds of looking at the cast list. But I will say this. Bella Ramsey appeared on screen. And I thought, holy crap, she looks like Ashley Johnson. Like a lot. Like a crazy, weird physical resemblance. And I only really know Ashley Johnson. I know she has worked for years, but she was the kid they added on Growing Pains with the curly red hair, right? So that's how I know who she is. Bella Ramsey physically looks like her and sounds like her. So obviously that was all intentional. But now I feel even more podcast points because I came up with an Ashley Johnson.
There you go.
Yep. So in my notes, I wrote Bella Ramsey, who I also, while we're talking about Bella Ramsey, I wrote, she doesn't look like she belongs on this show. She, for some reason, to me, looks like she belongs on Game of Thrones. Then I looked her up. Yep. She was on Game of Thrones.
I think you've earned the bear on the top shelf. You're getting all the podcast points today.
I don't know that reference. What is the bear? Can I have one? What is the bear on the top shelf?
I just mean it's a reference that I use of like, you're at a carnival and if you keep getting enough wins, you eventually get the bear on the top shelf.
Yes, I am a loser and I've never gotten the bear from the top shelf. So this is a big moment for me.
There you go. The
metaphorical bear on the top shelf. Okay, so
the third thing is that and I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but there are decisions that the characters make in the game that you are meant to disagree with. Okay. And because a lot of what part of what I think made the game so revolutionary and the show as well, at first glance it looks like a zombie game. It looks like a zombie show, but really it is a story about the horrible things that happen in disaster situations and the way that love can at times be a terrible thing, because the way that our love for individuals can cause us to kind of do terrible things to everyone else, and can just shift and there comes a time where, and I don't want to give anything away, but Joel winds up doing some things that are really horrible out of his love for Ellie. And when they played that in the video game, a number of people, my spouse included, but apparently enough that to get to the maker of the game, wrote in and were like, we hate this. The only way to finish the game was to have Joel do this thing that we didn't want him to do. And the maker of the game said, that's the point. I wanted to make you be complicit in Joel's crime. I wanted you to
uncomfortable with it.
Exactly.
Yes.
And the show really captures that feeling in just a wonderful way that I just was really blown away to realize it was from the game itself.
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy it connected to the game in a way that satisfies, because as a person who often reads the book and then sees the movie and they don't connect or it doesn't do it justice, it's thrilling when an adaptation really works for true fans. But I had just come off of watching all of Severance. And when I did Severance, I said it gave me bad dreams. It made me feel very tense. I loved every minute of Severance. Loved it. So I was going into this one like, I didn't think I could handle Severance, but here I come. This one makes Severance look like My Little Pony. This one was just so deeply troubling and unsettling, and not in a fun, it's going to take me on a ride and drop me back on Earth. Like I was very, very upset watching it. So just so the world knows, I watched the pilot and then I watched the next episode and then admitted my shortcomings to Matthew, who was very kind and said, well, that's what we'll talk about then. So when you're saying choices Joel makes, I didn't get there. Joel has just essentially accepted, at the end of the second episode, he loses his wife, whose name I can't think of. And
it's his daughter. I think his wife is long gone. Oh, no.
No. At the end of the second episode.
Yeah, Teresa, his
partner. So he loses her to the brain monsters. And so I saw, now it's just him and Bella on the road, as you said, a dystopian road trip. But I have a real tough time with dystopia, even though this isn't futuristic. But it is so bleak and scary to me that So,
and I also want to give you further credit because I think dystopia, the ability that I think most people, including myself, have to watch dystopia changes an awful lot based on how close to dystopia it feels like is in our own world. And when this came out, I think it was like 2022. We were in the midst. It was the whole aspect of infection and all of that coming off of COVID was obviously kind of hard to work with, but at least COVID was somewhat in the rearview mirror, if I remember. Like, vaccines were out and things like that, although it is still a concern. Please mask when you're in really public places. But, now in 2025, not to get too political, but like we are certainly on a downward slope to a real dystopia from a lot of our perspectives.
And watching the worst of humanity on display. Exactly. And that's something about these dystopian things. By necessity, Joel has to do the worst things a human can do.
Yeah.
And I understand that. That's because it's the only way to survive. But we're seeing that kind of shit in a world where it's not for your survival. It's just of your selfishness. And it's so deeply upsetting. Every time I log in with you, we end up going to this place. And I don't know, it's the former pastor in you that makes me feel like I just want to spill my guts.
Well, I'm always happy to listen, but we really should find some like happy, shiny, because there's a lot of that stuff. And I will say one of the ironies here is, I thought about encouraging you to watch it, but then I remember the first 5 or 10 minutes of it are also really hard. But episode 3 is, I think, it still has a lot of the dystopia in it. And I think, therefore, it's why I didn't recommend you watch it. But it winds up including in it, and this is mostly added for the show, but I think even most of the hardcore game listeners, unless you're a hateful idiot, still love it. An incredibly hopeful love story of two gay men who find each other in the dystopia. And it is, a number of us commented at the time that this is probably the most pride-affirming 50 minutes of media we've ever seen in our lives.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it sucks that it's wrapped around this horrific zombie thing that 80% of people aren't going to be able to watch because that's really hard to watch. But it's, and one of them is Nick Offerman. He wound up winning the Emmy Award that season for a guest actor in a show because his portrayal was just so perfect.
Oh.
And I remember hearing from a number of people that, who'd grown up with Nick Offerman as as Ron Swanson on Parks and Rec, who's this very, like, a wonderful character, but very much an epitome of masculinity. He eats steak and
Well, that is Nick Offerman's brand. He's written
Yes.
books about how he builds boats out of wood, and he's a very macho guy.
And so watching him be willing to kiss another man on screen and express deep romantic love for another man on screen. He sings him Linda Ronstadt, for God's sakes. It was just so beautiful and so touching.
Mhm.
And I think also kind of was a nice, it was kind of like 1 and 2 is hitting you in the face, but then 3 reminds you that like there is some good to be found in this. And it's too bad, I think, that I do think that kind of like if there's one complaint I think a lot of people have of the show, it's they dialed the dark so far up that a lot of people never got to that light in episode 3.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, I was desperate for, I guess, coming off of Severance, which I found perfect tonally because it was so dark, but they gave us so many laughs and such bizarre moments to just take you out and give you a break and then get back into the heaviness. There was no let up. This was just horrific violence after horrific situation. It was just very, very painful.
I mean, I'll be honest. I also watched all of Severance and also have been watching Yellow Jackets, which is, again, a very, very good show, but is such a punch in the gut every episode. So when you told me, no, you don't have to watch the other 6 episodes or 8 episodes, whatever it is, of The Last of Us before we record together, I was okay with that. Because I knew I would have had to watch like some hardcore comedy just to get myself back into like, the world isn't ending.
Well, funny because the next thing I wrote is, thank God I'm going on the most awesome 80s podcast next week and talking about The Little Mermaid. So the next thing I get to watch is The Little Mermaid. That should be a salve after this. Whew. I was confused. I mean, I understood the whole first part, but to lose your daughter like that and that feeling of the world is ending was so intense. And then they show us, the world in essence did end. Now it's 20 years later in Boston, my home city, which is now burned to the ground. And watching them, the only job you can get is cleaning up dead bodies and throwing them into piles to be incinerated.
Yep.
Not going to make a good musical, this one.
No.
It was brutal. And I was a little confused. I wrote incinerating bodies. This might have been a really bad idea. I don't think I can handle it. But I was confused. Who are these people? We were seeing different people. A woman that I later learned was named Marlene. She's got a kid in a room, and that had nothing to do with Joel. And I was so thrown. I said, does it come together in a Crash kind of way, the movie Crash? Because now I can't follow who all these new people are in this new world.
Yeah, I think it's a very related experience. And I'll admit, I'm glad that I had Mary with me because I could sometimes be like, wait, who am I supposed to pay attention to? Because there were so many new characters and stuff like that. And it does, I think, all come together quite well. But yeah, it definitely throws you at first.
Mm-hmm. It was, and then I had a weird observation that the actress playing Marlene was similar looking to his daughter. To his real daughter. Mm-hmm. And then I was trying to figure that out. Is that a thing? Did she actually survive that night? And it was, I found that to be a strange choice because I don't think they are connected, right?
No, they're not connected at all. And I do think that I think I had some of that same confusion. And I think this is always going to be the struggle with when you're adopting something from a medium that has a smaller audience to a medium that has a much larger audience, is which of those two audiences do you cater more to? And I definitely think that in this one, they probably were leaning a little more towards the people who had come to it from the video game.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, that doesn't make me dislike the show because I think that they managed to do a good enough job sort of eventually like pulling it all together. But I do think it's a little more uncomfortable if you haven't played the game. And I think I was probably really blessed by having someone who had played the game watching it with me. And I can definitely sympathize that without that, it probably makes it even harder.
Absolutely. Major update from my research department.
Go for it.
IMDb. Merle Dandridge is the beautiful actress who plays Marlene. She was the voice in the video game.
Oh,
That's
nice.
a
Okay.
huge boon.
Yeah.
You know, to be a voice actor who gets to actually create the role on screen. That's pretty fantastic.
And I think there's a couple of other small parts where that happens as well. With Joel and Ellie, I think they couldn't. Joel was just such a big part, and they wanted to get, I think, a big name like Pedro Pascal. And then with Ellie, of course, the actress is now just way too old to the voice actress is.
Right.
I should say that in a much more polite way. The voice actress is now an adult, and the part is supposed to be of a teenager.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that there really was just so, and I only mentioned those three, but there's just so many other voice actors who I think either are literally playing their character in this or playing someone similar.
Well, one thing I read is that the noises that the brain people make, the brain people have a name, right?
I just call them zombies. I think that they're
okay, but their whole head
not...
looks like a brain, like an exposed brain, and
they
make flickers, right? They make clickers. They make a weird noise that is, it's like nails on a chalkboard, and they used the voiceover actors from the game because they had created that noise, and that noise was very proprietary to them. So I read that they got to do the noises for the clickers. Yep. I wrote, there's no let up, there's no levity, I need something. And then one observation, this came out during COVID, no one was wearing protective gear when there's an infection going around. Isn't that strange? Like they thought this girl had been bit and was infected, but Marlene was just going and sitting up next to her and talking.
Right. Well, I think that's because in the show, and I think they'd established a little bit of the science earlier, but again, you're having so much information thrown at you. It's a fungal infection. It's not a virus. It's not a bacteria in the same way. And so it's not transferred. It's not airborne in any way. Okay. You have to be physically touched by it. At one point even, because it's a whole fungal network, but parts of it can dry out and basically be dead, and they walk on that, and there's no problems. So I think it is a higher bar of infection, but it was, and I don't know all the politics of that and how it was done, but I think because the game was made long before COVID. Correct. There's no masking of that in the game.
Right. I just imagine watching it during COVID. You're trapped in your house, you're still masking everywhere you go, and you're thinking, put a freaking mask on.
There definitely was some sense of that, yeah.
Yeah. But then when I moved on to episode 2, there was the protective gear. And I really loved the opening sequence of episode 2 in, with the actress, I didn't get her name, playing the scientist. Are they in Thailand?
Indonesia.
Indonesia. And they come and get her, and they ask her to identify what this is. And holy hell, it was powerful. She says, burn the city to the ground.
Yeah.
That's my solution as a doctor and as a scientist. She knows how catastrophic this is going to be. And her performance was absolutely wonderful when she says, just take me home and let me see my family.
Yeah, because she knows, it's clear to them when she knows she's going to die too.
Yeah. They all know. Great opening sequence. It cleared up a lot of my questions of how this all started and what this was. It reminded me of a book I had to read in college called The Hot Zone, which was about Ebola and how that spread. And all it takes is one careless mistake in a lab or careless doctor. And I can't fathom having watched this during COVID.
It's so funny. And I really love getting to hear your experience about it, because it tells me that this is probably something that could have been done better, because there is so much levity in later episodes. There's so much joy. Wow. There's so much happy care. At one point, Ellie finds a book of bad puns and starts reading them to Joel, and finally gets Joel to kind of and he's just, if you like Mando, if you like any of those shows about the grumpy old guy who winds up becoming the loving babysitter of a teenager or a young child.
Punky Brewster.
Yeah, it gets into that. But it really makes you want to know just how grim and dark the world is. I think that's wise. I think because there's two things. One is that it gets past that pretty quickly, and it's still a very dark world. But the other thing, and I think here I was really helped by having both my partner Mary, but also some of the people who I do podcast with a lot, especially Danielle, written in the Star Wars on Twitter and TikTok, who loves the show. And part of what they had been telling me was, don't pay too much attention to the infection, because don't pay too much attention to the zombies, because this is not a zombie story. This is a story about humanity and what happens when the normal rules break down and what do we do. And they're using the infection as a plot device to get us to that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think without knowing that, it probably would have changed how I watch this a lot differently.
Well, but even that is a little too scary for me. What happens when
That's
society breaks down and,
Yeah,
I mean, I like
dystopia
Lord
as
of the
hell.
Flies, just like, everybody, but it does scare me. And it's one of the reasons I gave up on Yellow Jackets, which I really loved the first season and a half of. And then it was so wild. It just didn't feel like, I guess I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, because I liked in Yellow Jackets, well, how do they establish rules? How do they establish hierarchy? How do they survive this horrific thing? And I did like that. But there was none of that happening yet in the 2 episodes that I watched of Last of Us. It was, and then him having to leave Tess, and that's because of the infection and because of the zombies.
Yep.
So, it just, I couldn't imagine pressing play on the next one.
And I think that's totally fair. And I think this is kind of again, I don't want this to always turn on, oh, Matthew's here, so it's therapy hour again. But, we can't ever watch these shows in a vacuum.
Right.
In grad school, I learned a lot about postmodernism, and that's the kind of idea that, like, there's no such thing as an objective viewing of any text, that there's always the conversation between the text and the reader, the watcher, whatever it is. And, it's the same thing here. I just did a podcast about a new Hunger Games book, which is all about the background of Haymitch. And I talked about how, for me, being the child of alcoholics, like, I have a very, I'm just laser focused on when does this character take his first drink in a way that someone else might not be. And similar, I think, there are Mamma Mia, chapter 2, the second Mamma Mia, I think it's called Here We Go Again.
Okay.
It's a fun, silly movie that I came close to walking out of because, forgive me, spoilers for a movie that's, I think, 10 years old by now. But it starts with the death of the mother, and it's all about the daughter, like, coming to terms with that. My mom had died a month ago.
Right.
I was like, this is not the movie I want to be watching right now. So
right.
This is all just kind of saying, I think it's totally fine for us to at any point say, this isn't for me right now.
But and it's the context of where we are in the world, where we are personally.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering, this is where I wrote, so somebody sits down to play this awesome game, and the game is from 2013, I think. So they're into it. They've played Last of Us. Let's say they've played it through once or twice. Then when COVID hits, do those people view COVID differently than I do, who has no experience with any sort of plague taking over the world or infection? To me, COVID was, unfortunately, in the beginning, it's like, well, it can't shut the world down. It can't affect us all. Like, it's terrible. It'll be like a bad flu season. Got it. But maybe the people who had played Last of Us were thinking, oh, shit, I know what's about to come. Not zombies, but...
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I never really have asked too many people that question, but I know from the few people I've talked to, I think I did bring up the COVID question. And I think what they said was no, because this was not anywhere near as transmissible. It was transmissible in very different ways, that they didn't feel like a connection between this and COVID. Again, that's a very small sample size. It's only anecdotal.
Right.
I think for a lot of folks, especially when playing the game, and here again, it's contextual because this has changed. But if you're Gen Xer or an older millennial, I think the connection is not to COVID, it's to HIV. Because this is spread by direct contact, and there's all this fear about, like, who is going to have it and who is not going to have it, and what do you do? and things like that. But again, I think that,
Interesting.
it's obviously very different in an awful lot of ways. Even way back then, HIV was not always a death sentence, and today it very much is not, if you have access to right medication. But yeah, I think that's about
Interesting. Well, I think one of the things, I'm not arguing with you, but a different way of looking at it is HIV was so seen as someone else's problem. Unfortunately, it was the gay panic. It wasn't going to affect, straight, which is, as we know, patently untrue. But there was a way to separate yourself. And I think, frankly, right-wingers did that with COVID. It's not going to get me. I'm not an old person. I'm healthy, but
I very much take your word for it. I was a bisexual at 16 in the 1990s. That was very much not my experience, but right. I very much take your word that would be. And I think it's very true. I think part of what makes a show like this powerful is getting people to think about, what if it happened to me? The Handmaid's Tale, I think, is a great example of this.
Love it.
And,
yes.
One of the critiques that's often made about it is The Handmaid's Tale, is a lot of white women experiencing what women of color have been experiencing for generations. But the thing is that, because of all the way our world exists, a lot of people couldn't make that connection until they saw it happening to someone like them. And that's really powerful. And that's what a show like this can do.
Yes. And that frustrates me. Again, political, but that's the Republican way. You can not support gay rights and then, oh, my kid is gay? Well, maybe they should have gay rights.
Yep.
And that infuriates me because I feel, as a proud liberal Democrat, I can look and say, well, that has nothing to do with me, but that's hurting people. So we shouldn't do that. We should eliminate that policy that's hurting people, not me. And we have empathy, and we can look outside ourselves and just want everybody to have a chance to succeed and have equality.
Right.
And so I know I'm way out of The Last of Us, but to look at something and say, well, it doesn't affect me, it is one of the most maddening things I hear.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. And I think it's
those who think differently than we do.
I think it's a real thing to wrestle with stories like this, where, because I think a lot of times, like in The Handmaid's Tale, you do get this awakening of a whole bunch of people who are like, oh my God, what if it happened to me? And I think, and I'm harping on that example, but I think it applies to so many things. I saw a lot of women of color creators being like, why the hell weren't you listening to us for the last 20 years? This is happening all over the world, just not to people like you. And it's a real struggle. And I think that for me, this is one of those moments of, accepting, I'm going to sound very Christian here for a second, but I'm a super progressive version of it. But, kind of accepting the brokenness of the world, and trying to meet people where they are. I have that empathy. I wish a lot of people had that empathy. And I think that's very much what this story, I think tying it back to The Last of Us, that's kind of what this is about, is not the lack of empathy, but it's when, and I think this is very much one of the problems in this country, particularly on the right, is when you have so much love and protection. Your thought is, I have to protect my family, that I'm willing to throw everyone under the bus. One immigrant out of thousands might hurt my family, so I have to throw all the immigrants out of the way. One transgender person might, although there's no evidence for this, harm my daughter in sports or some nonsense like that. I have to stop all of it.
Right.
And this game and this show, for people who can get to the end, and I think it's a failure if it means that not everyone can get to the end, because I think that's one of the biggest lessons that it's about, is about that lack of not only empathy, but empathy for someone you don't know or is different from you. Very cool.
I know this is what you do and this is your jam. You've said that. I like ethical questions and deeper meanings and things. I am a shallow surface person and I don't see this until you and I sit down and talk. So I'm so grateful that you bring this depth to this.
Thank you. I'm sometimes not very fun at parties because it's hard to turn this off. But yes, I'm very glad that I found a medium where it's useful.
Exactly. So I earlier said I needed levity, and there was one moment, one laugh for me, when Ellie says, well, I vote the long way just based on that limited information, because they say, like, one way can get us killed, but the other, but the other way's longer. Right. And she's like, let's just take the long way. And she delivers it very flat. And I wrote, LOL, finally.
Yeah.
I'm laughing. Now, I I I hate to be negative about performers, but I'm not sure I like Bella Ramsey. And I'm also not sure if it's that I don't know if it's her acting or that she's doing an accent that is not her native accent, which I find often throws actors. Is she critically lauded for this? Do people love her?
I think she is, but I do think that a lot of people have said her performance gets a lot better.
Okay.
And I think one of the biggest things is that in later episodes, they go out into the world, and this is where a lot of the levity comes from, but also a lot of the really interesting stuff. And in those episodes, one of the things we realize is she was born after this fungal outbreak had happened. So she has lived her entire life during this time. And so, like, she gets in a car in a truck with Joel and starts to drive away. And there's been this whole thing of like getting to find a battery for the truck and cleaning up the truck. And she's never ridden in a car before. And it's just such this moment of wonder and joy for her, and her driving Joel crazy a little bit with it. And yeah, I think it's really a shame. And I think, like, I want to defend the show, but I think your experience is a good example of, like, maybe the show probably didn't have to be quite as hard as it was if it winds up making it less accessible. Because I think in a lot of the later episodes, you see a lot of different sides of her. I do think the accent is not perfect. I've also seen some criticism of Pedro Pascal's accent in this because he's trying to be like Texan, but he's been in Boston for 20 years or however many years, etc. But yeah, I do think her acting gets significantly better.
Okay, good to know. And that flat affect, I think my accusation would be like Nicole Kidman for 20 years when she would play American, she would whisper. Yes. Because she couldn't use her full voice with her non-native accent. And I think a lot of Bella Ramsey's flat delivery and flat affect was like, I learned how to pronounce these things with an American accent, and I'm just going to say them.
So that is the only part of it I'd push back on a little bit. And I never even realized that about voice actors, about how people use voice and accents and stuff like that. So you might well be accurate on, I think you're definitely accurate on that. But I think part of what it's also about is repression, and about how both Joel and Ellie have been in literal survival mode, for Joel for half his life, for Ellie her entire life.
Yeah.
Early in those episodes, she mentions that she had been with a friend when she got bit and her friend had died. And we later see a flashback of that and see that it was actually a relationship that she had with this other girl, and a very powerful one. Through that, through a lot of the other stuff with Joel, through some of the experiences she has, it's really about two people who have never, they've never sat down in a therapist's office, because that doesn't really exist anymore.
Right.
Suddenly realizing that maybe talking about your feelings isn't the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
So I do think that affect of kind of neutrality is more part of the character than it might be in other cases. But you may well be right.
Conscious choice. No, I didn't get beyond it, but it would be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Is she she's more emotional on Game of Thrones? I didn't see her on that either.
Oh yeah, she's very emotional in Game of Thrones.
Okay.
But in curious. That she's speaking in what I believe is her natural accent.
Yes.
She's got a Scottish accent.
I'd be very curious. Okay, in the second episode, they get to one of the coolest sets I've ever seen, and that's the sunken hotel.
Oh yeah.
Holy crap. First of all, it totally felt like a video game. When you open a door and you enter a new room, and all of a sudden everything is, the water is waist high, and you can see like the old piano sticking out of the water. It's just so cool looking. They built that thing beautifully.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a sound stage or what, but I really enjoyed being in that world. It was
it was such a nice way of kind of reminding you that, like, all the ruins that they were going through were real places, And again, I think actually there is a moment of levity there as well, where Ellie kind of like rushes up and wants to just push the bell, because of course she's never been to a hotel. Right. She's never, had room service, because those things don't exist in her world.
Right.
Yes. And I will say, one of the things the video game did really well was, again, something that I don't really appreciate because I'm not a very visual person, but is visual storytelling. In the video game, when you're not being attacked, you often get these moments to like just sort of look around, and you can rush through it if you want. But if you really look around, like every inch of the walls, there's going to be a poster announcing something, and sometimes it's just quarantines have set in, like that you can learn so much about the world by looking at just those little things. And they very intentionally put all those things into this as well.
Yep. And I don't have the patience for that. My husband calls me Bam Bam. It's like, let's just get to the next location, where he would say, let's look around. Let's see what we can learn about the world.
Yep.
Ain't got time for that.
That's when I pull out my phone, but I let Mary tell me what's happening.
Exactly. And then question, am I picking up on something? Ellie is often trying to get a gun. She really wants one.
Yes.
So what is coming in the first season where she gets a gun, or is it because she wants to kill Joel? Or
I think it's that they live in a world where guns are power. The part of the point is that there's been kind of this, the federal government, such as it exists, is basically running things in a very authoritarian manner. And maybe there's some need for that. Like, it's kind of like just permanent martial law, because like you have to be super careful, but still it becomes very totalitarian. And, she is an orphan for most of her life. I think her mother dies in childbirth, and we don't even know who her father is. And she's kind of been, bussed around to these different groups. And she was in kind of a really bad foster situation that she ran away from. Then she gets bit. And now all of a sudden, these like 3 different groups have been trading her as a prisoner from one group to another. So I think it's for her, it's much more about not killing Joel or killing a specific person, but wanting to be independent, wanting to not just be... Exactly. Wanting to not... And there is a moment, I think it's in episode 4 or 5, where she gets a gun and has to use it to protect Joel. And it's one of the nice kind of emotional breakthrough moments, because she's like, look, you should have given me a gun before. I needed this. But she's also, and I think because it's not a zombie, it's against another human. And it was a human who was like trying to attack them and kill them. But still, it breaks her in a lot of ways to have killed a person, because guess what? Actually taking a human life is a kind of significant thing, even in a kill or be killed moment. And Joel says, I wanted to protect you from that. I didn't want you to have to feel that. That's why I didn't want you to have the gun. And it's just a really touching moment of him recognizing why she needed that, but also recognizing that he wanted to protect her from it. And
of course,
it's an understandable goal of his, but it just wasn't realistic.
Right. Yeah, I thought I was maybe picking up on some double-crossing intentions on her part, but I was wrong. But she several times tries to, I'll carry that. Let me have a gun. Why?
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, simmer down. They said no, Ellie. So
yeah, I think it's not as much a specific plan for double cross as much as it just maybe he's going to double cross me. Maybe I think double cross is, before she learns to trust him, there's certainly some element of, I don't want to be trapped with him. So I want to have the option to double cross if I need it.
Sure. Well, that's as far as I got in my watching. Is there anything else you want to say about The Last of Us and why you love it so much?
So I think it's worth talking about the ending. Are you okay if I spoil the ending for you and for your listeners?
For season 1.
Season 1, yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. What happens is we learn that the reason why, because the thing that makes her so special is that she was bitten by the fungus creatures, the zombies, but she hasn't converted. She hasn't been infected the way it normally happens. And we learn it's because her mother was infected right at the moment of her birth. So she kind of got a vaccine. She kind of got like half of it or something like that. And we don't really know why that happened, but there's a group of scientists who are convinced that if they can study what happened to her, that they can come up with a cure and they can save the world.
Right.
Save all the hundreds of millions of people, if not billion people that are still alive. Probably more like hundreds of millions, because it's been, a massive world genociding event.
Yes.
And so the two of them get there, and she says a number of times, like, this is what matters to me. I want to be useful. I want to be helpful. And she does say kind of like, and I'm willing to die for this, And we get there, and the doctors are like, oh, this is great. And she's injured already. So the doctors put her under anesthesia and say, don't worry, Joel, we're going to start taking care of this. And then Joel, I think, overhears a conversation or someone shares too much with him, and he learns that what they need to do is to study her brain.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to remove her brain to do that, and she's going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And Joel kills all the scientists.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's the part that is
That's
so
right.
hard
That's
to
the
play.
Republican response that you were just talking about.
Well,
right?
And I
need
further.
to protect my own at the cost of the greater good.
I mean, you're a parent. If someone said to you, like, you know, would you sacrifice one of your children to save the world? Like, I'm happy to blame Republicans. I think most of us, though, would have some of that reaction of like,
yeah, you're right.
You know,
yeah.
But you're right. The like, don't think about it, just grab a gun and do it. That's much more on the right side.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I think that because I don't think there's a clear and easy answer to it. And I think, you know, you kind of want to play with like, what if we just wake her up and Joel can get her? Because I think part of the implication is she never actually says it, but I think she would have been okay with this.
Mm-hmm.
But Joel never gives her that choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it, you know, I think one of the things we talk about a lot with healthy love is attachment, and like to what extent, you know, if you love something, you're willing to let it go, and the vice versa. And Joel, having lost a daughter already, the question of, is Joel doing this out of love for Ellie and thinking Ellie wouldn't want this, or is Joel doing this because he can't lose Ellie after losing his other daughter, because she kind of has become a daughter to him? And it's just, I think psychologists and philosophers could write tomes that would never settle these questions because they're so deep.
Sure. That might have kept me up more nights.
Yeah.
So,
so maybe glad we didn't get to that part.
I'm going to tell everybody my business. You're going to tell everybody your business. And then you pointed out, I didn't know that we lost Val Kilmer as of this recording. It happened last night. So let's pay a little homage to a great American actor, if we can do that.
Of course. And I want to actually start by saying, I don't know, have you seen the movie Willow?
When I was a kid, yes.
Okay. But do you remember it at all?
No.
Because that is a fan favorite of nerds. And I think that one might be worth rewatching. And I'd be happy. I don't want to volunteer for a fourth time. If you've got someone else who'll do it, great. But I'd happily volunteer.
Tommy will take you down if you try to beat him to the fourth.
You know, just let him get the fourth first, or bring on both of us at the same time.
I had not thought of Willow.
But yeah, because Val Kilmer's in it, and one of my favorite performances of his. It's a nerd show, a nerd movie that is so happy and good and has so much levity. And I was just thinking that would be a really nice moment, you know, so that I don't always come in with the most depressing, let's talk about humanity at its worst.
Hey, you had Orville. You're fine. I'm adding it to my list. I'm not just texting somebody at random.
Perfect. No, and to me, it's one of his favorite roles, and it's one of the ones I thought of first when I heard that Val Kilmer passed. I think we'd all known that this was going to be coming at some point.
Yes.
If you've seen the new Top Gun movie, or the wonderful documentary that I haven't seen, but I know you have.
I have.
Everybody knew that he had throat cancer, and there was all sorts of complications around that. But yeah, he was, and I think because he was almost always a second man. But Roger Ebert once described him as like the most unknown leading man in Hollywood, because he'd been in so many things, but he just never was thought of in the kind of Tom Cruise, you know, Brad Pitt, all that kind of people conversation. But I think he very much should have been.
Well, I think for what I remember of the documentary, which we watched when it came out, I'm sure people will be flocking to it now. He really shot himself in the foot with his attitude. And he came around at the end of his career realizing I acted like a big dick, and I made a lot of demands, and I was not easy to work with, and people didn't want to hire me. And now I look back and think, why didn't I appreciate what I have? He really, I think, came around.
Yeah.
But I'm not so sure it's just like, hey, he never hit it so big. I think it was intentional. He admitted to being a real jerk.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
But I always saw, you know, my memory of him is Top Secret.
Yeah.
And seeing him as a comedic guy. And I just recently saw him in a Saturday Night Live. I think it must have been 10 years old, but they made a short film, and he just walks into the film as himself, making fun of himself. And he's so funny. He was always really funny and charming.
Yeah, I feel like he's one of those actors who, and maybe again, this is because later in his career, he was willing to kind of make more fun of himself. But one of my favorite roles of his was, it was just a one episode, one-off He was in the TV show Entourage as which is a show that is, I thought, very funny at the time. And I still think it's funny, but has really not aged well. It's about kind of a brat pack of actors who treat women terribly.
Yeah.
But at one point they encounter this guy who's a drug dealer because they need to buy pot. And it's this guy who is just a total, like, a 60s hippie, but who's made himself into some, like, Tibetan monk kind of figure sitting on the mountain. The Sherpa is what he calls himself. And just has a huge beard and huge, like, Grateful Dead hair. And it's just, like, so chill and so cool, man. And it took me, like, halfway through the performance to realize it was Val Kilmer. Yeah. And it was such a different role than I think he'd done before. And it was so funny. Yeah. That it's just one of my favorites. Along with, like, I was the right age that Top Gun was, like, a formative experience in my life at 10. And so him being, like, that figure was so locked in my brain.
Yep. Well, I'm sad that he was pretty young, right? Late 60s?
65, yeah.
60. Oh, I mean, so young. And it's a sad loss for Hollywood. Definitely. And for movie lovers. So everybody go watch your favorite Val Kilmer movie when you hear this.
Yeah. And as it's a nerd podcast, I'll say give Batman I think it's Batman Forever is that one, but whatever Batman movie he's in, if you think about it as a continuation of the Batman 66 show, that it's the campy Batman, it's not the Tim Burton Batman, it's actually a really fun performance, and he's one of the best Bruce Waynes we've got.
I remember liking that.
Yeah.
From back in the day. And I also really liked Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. That's like a little known film.
I've heard about that one. I haven't seen it. I did find out that, have you ever seen the movie The Outsiders?
Of course.
It is such a who's who of people who went on to have huge acting careers. And he was
C. Thomas Howell. I'm just kidding.
And he was
random, I don't know why I wanted to say something mean about C. Thomas Howell. He's lovely.
Well, Val Kilmer apparently was offered a role in that and turned it down.
Not smart, Val Kilmer.
Yeah, could have made different choices, but we still want to miss him. Wonderful actor.
Yes. Make Me a Nerd is a production of True Story FM, engineering by the peerless Pete Wright. The theme song is Wonderstruck by Jane and the Boy. You can find me on Instagram at Mandy_Kaplan_Clavens, both with K's, and on Blue Sky at Mandy Miscast. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. Send me a note. Tell me what you like, what I should watch next, and hit that 5-star button. It helps more people find the podcast. And if you're feeling extra supportive, please go to makemeanerd.com/join. And hitting that join button will get you your episodes ad-free and early and some fun bonus content. That's all my business. Matthew Fox, where can the world listen to you?
Well, if you go onto Mandy's page and you do all the good things you should do there, then you click kind of back a little bit, you'll be on the True Story FM page. And then you can also find my podcasts. I'm known as The Ethical Panda. You can also just go to theethicalpanda.com, all one word. Of course, it's all one word. It's a URL, but you know that. I'm just helping those of us. But yeah, I have 2 podcasts I do. Superhero Ethics is one, and Star Wars Generations podcast is the other one. Star Wars Generations obviously is about Star Wars. We've recently been doing a lot to gear up for the new Andor TV show. We did a whole bunch of coverage on oh my god, I can't remember the name of it now. The kids show that they just did. I'm a terrible Star Wars fan because I don't.
I know it.
Skeleton Crew. Skeleton Crew.
Thank you. Oh,
thank you.
Darn it.
Such a good show. So good for kids. So good for all ages. And on the other podcast, Superhero Ethics. If you got really sick of me droning on about all this ethical stuff and you just wanted to talk about the zombies, well, don't go to my podcast because that's all it is. But we do a wide range of stuff. We've done some things about anime. We've done some stuff about video games. We've recently been doing we did an episode on the new Hunger Games book. And we really try to look at, like, what are all the different ethical questions that get raised and all these kind of things, and what does it mean for our own world? What does it mean for the world of the characters? What are we talk about ethical questions both in front of and behind the camera in terms of how these things are made and stuff like that. So yeah, just a lot of fun stuff to check out.
Everybody, please go give those podcasts a listen. And thank you, Matthew Fox, for being a 3-peater. I really, really appreciate it. And I did Andor myself. That's already recorded and in the can, as they say, and it's going to come out when the series comes out for season 2. So That's coming down the pike for everybody to hear. and Fourth Wing and lots of other fun stuff. So everybody, please stay tuned. And until next time, thank you for listening.
May the force be with you.